Hi students, so we are going to be talking about the gifted and talented students and what's going on over there? Okay, sorry. You can see my dog in the background. Okay, learning outcomes. Discuss how biological, let me minimize myself, sorry. Discuss how biological and environmental factors influence the development of giftedness and the underrepresentation of students of color in gifted and talented programs. And then we're also going to be discussing general education settings and how strategies and practices can benefit all students, not just the GT. Okay, what does it really mean to be gifted and talented? Interestingly enough, there are only 32 states that have laws requiring schools to provide gifted and talented education. Only 8 states do not provide any of this funding. Okay, and these are noted in your textbook. They don't necessarily say which ones, which states, but that information is noted there. Then this is all another interesting fact. IDEA does not require states to provide services. It's a question to ponder. If they do not provide services, then are these students supposed to be considered special needs students? There are more girls than boys, and then there's an underrepresentation of certain students of diverse backgrounds. So these are really interesting questions to ask. Why doesn't IDEA require this? And why is there more representation of girls than boys? And same situation with students of diverse backgrounds. So Gardner's principal intelligences. I think you might be familiar with this from 1301 when you were exposed to the idea of multiple intelligences in your course. Academic intelligence is not the only intelligence, as we know. There's musical, kinesthetic, logical, mathematical, linguistic, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. Okay, so what do these actually mean? Some of these are obvious, but then there are some where you're wondering, well, how does that manifest? What is a spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and a naturalist actually encompass? In your textbook on figure 17.1 on page 432, 433, and I'm going to show it to you all, there's a really nice table here that shows the different types of intelligences and what they mean. I mean, what are the characteristics? So let's look at spatial. Let's see if I can make it bigger. So spatial, like we already talked about, I mean, linguistic, basically, they're remarkable at using words. Okay, that's what it basically is. So spatial is mental imagery. They recognize instances of the same element, ability to make transformation of one element into another. Understand multiple perspectives, details, mental maps. So those students, they probably also learn differently. These students with multiple intelligences learn differently, not just a typical student who can sit in the chair and listen and take notes type. Okay, intrapersonal. What does this mean? They're able to pretend or play act different roles of adults, easily senses moods. They have a high sense of, a high sense of emotional intelligence, interpersonal. And then intrapersonal, extensive knowledge of the internal aspects of the person. They have understanding, again, understanding of themselves, sensitivity to feeling, things of that nature. And then a naturalist is the one who can relate to the world around him or her, very well in tune with their environment, differentiates many types of environmental item, makes them such as different makes of cars, recognizes many different rocks, minerals, trees. So they're able to understand their surroundings very, very in its minutia, okay? Rather than they see just rocks and trees, they want to learn more about the types of rocks and trees and the types of leaves and the types of ways in which rocks and trees exist. I don't know. I'm going on and on about it, but there's, in other words, these types of intelligences, the students who have these are really motivated than a typical student to go beyond the necessary knowledge that you gain in grade school. Like they're going to study every piece of it and spend hours learning about it. And that just shows you students' different types of abilities and innateness of who they are. Okay. All right, I'm going to move this out, go back to the PowerPoint. Characteristics. Difficult to identify the characteristics of all because they could vary. Okay, gifted and GT students are on a continuum, just like there's a whole bunch of different intelligences. They also are on a continuum. Some gifted and talented students are just so well versed. Some of them are even like, can do all sorts of things. They're highly intelligent academically, and then they're musically talented, and they're also athletically inclined. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways in which intelligences could operate. So it's not just one way. It could be multiple ways too. High general intellect, prodigy. People have more than 125 IQ. In fact, I have a friend who used to be a photographer for Raynard School, which is a school here in Houston, and it is specifically for GT students. And these students have like 150 and above IQ. They're incredibly intelligent. But some of the issues, which we're going to go over about students that have high intelligence, they may not be emotionally, have some emotional immaturities. And that is actually very typical of a GT student. Some of them are very creative. They have ability to lead people innately, talents in visual and performing arts, and then social and emotional characteristics. So I actually want to go over that social and emotional characteristics part in a little bit more detail. Okay, so that last bullet point here, social and emotional characteristics. The GT students experience a range of emotions and feelings. And research actually suggests that children who are GT, categorized as GT, have lower levels of anxiety and depression than their typical peers. Why? Because some of them deal with perfectionism. Okay? All right, so they have feelings of being a perfectionist. And I don't know if you guys have ever met a perfectionist, or maybe you are one. They're all or nothing. Either they completely are successful in what they're doing, or they don't want to do it at all. So those types of perfectionistic type of people have difficulty sometimes accomplishing homework or projects or whatever it may be, because they just feel like if they're not going to get the perfect grade on it, then they don't want to do it at all. And these students do need some a drastic amount of encouragement, but also a different way of thinking, so they're not necessarily putting themselves in an all or nothing type of mindset. Other influencers are also relationships that they have with students, parenting dynamics, early school experiences. That these all affect social and emotional well-being of GT students. And you know what? It's not even just GT students. It could be any student. And some students who are gifted also face bullying or cyberbullying, mainly because other students just don't understand these types of students. And they don't necessarily understand even what may be going inside of their mind, or the GT student may not be able to communicate what they really want to say in the most effective way. And sometimes GT students do not understand empathy. Some don't, okay? They don't necessarily understand why that person's confused or why that person's feeling that way. And then it could cause them to have some awkwardness when they're around other people. So these are just a few of the characteristics. Not all GT students have this, but there are some that do. That particular school I just told you about, Raynard, there are some students who don't have, they have high IQ, but they don't necessarily have a high emotional quotient. Okay, EQ. Okay, causes. So let's talk about the causes. Nature versus nurture debate. In other words, how much is it genetic that they are gifted? And then how much is it nurturing from the parents' or guardians' point of view of what they can, their capabilities are. And then parents are often involved in modifying curricula and assignments in an attempt to go further challenge their GT students. In other words, parents can play a huge role in advancing their student. But when they see their child has the capacity to intelligently think, then they're going to challenge that child to really expand their thinking. And that is that nurture part of their environment. But there are some who just, have this innate ability no matter what their parents do, that they are able to rise above their environment and not let the environment get in the way of their own goals or get in the way of their own abilities, which to me I think is phenomenal. Okay, evaluating students. Let's talk about evaluating GT students. Challenges. There are some challenges that deal with the evaluation process, and mainly the challenges are dealing with students of color. It is very important that students of color are not disregarded in the process of evaluation. Now, so I do want to point out some of the challenges, okay? In particular, Black and Latino students are underrepresented, and this is from your text, in GT education. In fact, a 2016 report from the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights examined the data from 2013 and 2014 school year, and there showed some concern. This report showed that Black and Latinx students represented 42% of all students enrolled in public high school. So that's almost 50%, right? And this is only 2013, 2014. Those numbers have actually increased since then. But, okay, so they're 42%. That's a good chunk of students. Only 28% of students enrolled in GT are Black or Latinx students. That is about a fourth of the students, okay? The white students represent 49% of all the students in the public schools, and they're offered GT education programs. And then they're 49% of white students, and the representation of white students is 57%. Okay? 57% of students are white, and 49% represent the GT students. That's huge, guys. Huge. And only 28% of both Black and Latinx students are represented. So this report was an alarm to the Department of Ed. And they started thinking, we need to rethink how we're evaluating students in the GT department, because there are plenty of students in diverse backgrounds who have these intelligences. They're just not being recognized. What could be that problem? It could start from the state and the leadership from the state. It could start from the leadership with the schools. It could start